So what I'm sharing on the screen here is a map that we put together really recently with a survey. So we reached out to some of the folks that are here today, and as well as some other additional folks who couldn't make it tonight, to ask about where they have seen beavers. And just from this really initial first survey, we got some amazing results back. That's really helping paint a picture of what's happened with the beavers that were originally introduced to Southern Arizona back in 1999 and 2000. So we had about 16 beavers introduced at that time. And what we can see from this map here is that they have dispersed to other locations. So it may be obvious that they've probably moved downstream, and we have some sightings for sure downstream, although I know we're missing a bunch. But then the really cool thing is you can see quite a few sightings that are upstream. So this is one of the coolest parts of the story that we're going to be talking about tonight, learning about those beavers that have moved across the border, moved upstream in the San Pedro into Mexico, and even into the Santa Cruz watershed. So we've been kind of hearing this story trickle in, but not until we did this survey did we really start to understand the fuller picture of this. Let me move along. So I mentioned earlier the River Run Network. So thank you, River Run Network members who showed up here tonight. This is a group based mostly out of Tucson, though certainly we welcome folks that aren't in Tucson as well, but all working towards restoring Tucson's heritage of flowing creeks and rivers. And we've been building this grassroots group since 2016, now about 2,200 members involved, and we get out as frequently as we can into the watershed, though with COVID that slowed down a bit. But this is a photo from one of our past events out along the Tanque Verde Creek. So we get out on creek walks, river cleanups. I think I have some other photos of that, but really this restoring flow, we've got a few photos here of places in Tucson that still see flow most or all of the year. And so there is actually water in some of our rivers. We would like to see a lot more, but that's what this is all about with beavers, is helping restore flows, helping restore our groundwater, and just create a community and communities we all want to be a part of. As I mentioned, the creek walks here. And then we also have a community science program monitoring flow in the Tucson area. And one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight is this community science effort to monitor beaver populations. So looking to add a little bit more robust community science effort in terms of population survey going into next fall. So keep an ear out for that. River cleanups, I know that's a topic that a lot of people are concerned about, wanting to keep the trash out of our creeks and rivers. So there's definitely opportunities to get out and do that. And then we're going to be hearing in a little bit about the beaver survey that happened back in December, and we had some River Run Network members come help out with that. Finally, before I go on to our speakers, just wanted to mention WMG's Release the Beavers campaign. So this started a couple years ago, focused primarily on introducing beavers to Las Cienegas National Conservation Area, the headwaters of the Santa Cruz watershed. That is still in the works. We're going to be talking about that a little bit tonight, but we've really decided that this campaign needs to be so much more than that. As we've been learning more about the beavers in the San Pedro, their amazing story and the need to really monitor those populations. They've taken upon themselves to move into the Santa Cruz watershed. So we want to learn more about that. We want to make sure that that happens annually and across the whole river. So not just in the Sprinka in Arizona, but across the whole San Pedro River on both sides of the border and the Santa Cruz. We really want to understand what the beaver populations are like. We are advocating for additional releases where it is feasible. So not just Las Cienegas, but potentially more releases along the San Pedro. And then the third element of the campaign is really restoring our creeks and rivers through slowing the flows, spreading the water across the floodplain, and recharging the aquifer, all the same things beavers do. So we need to work alongside with them, doing restoration, preparing these areas for beavers to thrive, and working alongside to really restore these precious areas of water in the desert. Okay, so before I think I want to ask one more poll question before we get into this next one. So, Lauren. Yeah, so before we start to hear about some of this, why do you think beavers migrated from southern Arizona into Mexico? There could be reasons that are not listed here, but we're starting with these 4 reasons. All right, waiting for a few more people to fill this out, see what the crowd thinks. I think we're going to start to really learn about the answer to this question, but I think we also maybe don't have the full picture of this answer. We shall see. Our next panel is going to be really interesting. All right, let's share the results, Lauren, of this. Okay, so the majority, well, 37%, the biggest answer is to find water. To start a families after that, and then to find food, third choice, and fleeing persecution. Maybe it was all of the above. So, all right, thanks for that poll question to help whet your appetite on what we're talking about tonight. So for this next panel, we have some really amazing speakers who have deep experience working in Sonora, some ecologists, biologists, with Profana Mexico and also with Naturalia. Joaquin will be moderating this panel. We have a bunch of slides, so I can move the slides and through the slides as feels appropriate. And then I think we'll have some questions. So I'll just go ahead and start. I believe Antonio is speaking first.
Yes, but this is Joaquin. Thank you so much, Lisa, and welcome everybody. And it's not in the script, but I do want to welcome everybody because I think this is the first time we celebrate International Beaver Day here in Tucson. So this is a very important event that is gathering different watersheds, is gathering different countries. So I really like that the Beavers is putting us together. So welcome everybody, first toast of the night. And thank you for the great introduction, Lisa. And we do have Los Sonorenses, including myself, 4 people from Sonora that will be talking about their experience in Beavers. Tenemos a los sonorenses y por primera vez en Tucson estamos celebrando el Día Internacional de los Castores. Y eso es algo que tenemos que celebrar, es algo que tenemos que seguirle dando, es algo que tenemos que seguir contribuyendo en la salud de estos animalitos y la salud de nuestros ecosistemas, sobre todo nuestras cuencas binacionales. Tenemos a Antonio Esquer, sí, tenemos a Mario Siret y tenemos a Carlos Valdés, 3 expertos o 3 colaboradores que han trabajado mucho con castores en Sonora y parte en Estados Unidos también. So we have 3 experts and people that has been working in both sides of the border, some of them for the health and reintroduction of beavers, particularly in the San Pedro. So with that, to start with this wonderful question is, what attracts you to work with beavers? ¿Qué es lo que te atrae para trabajar con los castores? Y Antonio nos mandó esta foto, así que vamos a empezar con Antonio. And Antonio sent us this picture, so we are going to start with Antonio with that.
Okay. Esa figura que está ahí es una figura de palo fierro, es una artesanía de la comunidad Seri. Bueno, inspirada en la comunidad Seri, probablemente la hizo un artesano más sonorense, no indígena, y tiene su historia porque hace aproximadamente 20 años que empezamos a trabajar en la cuenca del río San Pedro. Y yo estaba trabajando para el Instituto del Medio Ambiente y el Desarrollo Sustentable, lo que ahora es la Comisión de Ecología, CEDES. Y The Nature Conservancy estaba desarrollando algunas acciones acá en la cuenca del río San Pedro. Y entonces hubo varias actividades y varias acciones, y uno bien importante era un tema de planificación para la conservación de la cuenca del río San Pedro. Y entonces el río San Pedro en Estados Unidos, como ustedes saben, está el Bajo San Pedro, el Alto San Pedro y el verdadero Alto San Pedro que está en México, ¿no?
Antonio, dame un poquito de tiempo, Graciela.
Sí.
¿Quieres interpretar esto?
Sure. So what Antonio is explaining is in regards of what attracts you to work with the beavers. This image here is a very significant. It's an iron with art craft made by Seri handcrafters, or maybe inspired on it. And it's about a history that has been for over 20 years since I started to work at the San Pedro Basin. At the time, I was at the Comisión de Desarrollo Sustentable, or the CEDES, and we were working at the San Pedro with different activities. And one of them that was very important to me was the team of planning for the San Pedro Basin. And, you know, there is the Alto San Pedro, the Bajo San Pedro, and the verdadero San Pedro.
Alto, el verdadero Alto San Pedro, ¿no?
El verdadero Alto San Pedro, the true Alto San Pedro Basin.
The upper. Bueno.
There are two uppers, yes.
Bien, entonces la cosa, había dos actividades que estábamos haciendo. Uno era el tema de acuerdos de privados, conservación en tierras privadas, y ese era mi rol. Y otro compañero estaba encargado del Freshwater Initiative, y era más cosas de restauración ribereña y ese tipo de cosas. Y entonces en esta cosa de los equipos de las 3 áreas del San Pedro hubo varios intercambios de experiencia, visitas al campo, y una de esas visitas fue a un lugar cerca de San Manuel, Arizona, y nos llevaron a un sitio que tenía que ver, habían recién introducido castores ahí. Entonces, la cosa de eso, siempre quisimos tener castores en México, y no, simplemente no había castores en México. No sé si quiera continuar ahí, Graciela.
Gracias. So, there was different activities that we were working on, and some of them were some agreements. One was for the conservation in private land, and the second one was for freshwater initiative. And in different areas at the San Pedro, we did 3 visits to the fields, and over there, they invited us to visit the San Manuel, Arizona area, where the beavers had recently been introduced, and we didn't have beavers in Mexico, so we were very interested in that.
Okay, entonces parte de las actividades estamos haciendo cuestiones de restauración en el cauce principal del río San Pedro, con áreas de exclusión de ganado, y en ese periodo también fue cuando se adquirió el rancho Los Fresnos en 2004 para hacer una reserva privada de conservación. Y a mí me tocó estar a cargo los primeros 3 años de ese rancho. Y en una ocasión, en el año 2006, bueno, antes de eso, pues no teníamos castores, entonces de casualidad encontré esa figura de palo fierro en el mercado de las artesanías, y dije, pues al menos vamos a poner esto en el rancho para tener, ¿no?
That's neat. Let's stop there and let Graciela take that.
Sí.
So what he's saying is that part of the activities that he was involved with was the working at the main cauce, the main stream of the San Pedro River and some areas of the exclusion for the cattle. And so also the area at Los Fresnos was acquired for conservation. And that's where I was working. I was involved for over 3 years. And so we didn't have castores, we didn't have beavers. So by chance, I found this image of the beaver that I found it at the market. And I thought, well, I'm gonna at least bring this one to our area.
Me gusta mucho esa historia, Antonio.
Sí, eso es la... Perdón.
¿Qué es lo que estamos viendo en esta fotografía?
Bueno.
What are we seeing on this
el caso que meses después de haber llevado la figura de Palo Fierro al rancho Los Fresnos, para digo, al menos tener castores en Palo Fierro, a los meses tuvimos una visita de personal del Arizona Game and Fish y del Fish and Wildlife Service de Phoenix, entre ellos nuestro amigo Jim Rutherford. Y caminando por un lado en Los Frenos hay un represo, una presa más o menos grande. Jim preguntó, ¿tienen castores aquí? No, ¿por qué? Porque parece que ahí hay un árbol que está muy similar a cuando los castores lo roen, ¿no? Entonces lo que hicimos fue ir al otro lado del represo y colocar una cámara trampa. Y esto que estamos viendo fue la primera foto que se tomó, la primera evidencia de castor entonces, ¿no? Y entonces pues fue una fiesta porque ya sabes, entre todos los involucrados, pues un montón de mensajes de email y una cadena de mensajes festejando que por fin teníamos castores. Entonces, y básicamente, y de ahí hicieron de ese represo en Los Fresnos su casa. Y yo a los meses, yo ya me moví de organización y me fui a trabajar a The Nature Conservancy y hacer otras cosas. Y entonces ahí ya creo que Manuel nos va a platicar más al rato un poco más, y Gerardo, pero Mario tiene algo que contarnos en ese mismo periodo.
So what he's saying, well, Joaquin was highlighting that this was a wonderful history or story that he was telling us about how he brought the ironwood beaver to the area of the Fresnos. And so that is a wonderful story. But he said after a few months that we had this ironwood beaver at Los Fresnos, we had some visitors that came from Fish and Wildlife Services and other places and from Phoenix. And there was Jim, I didn't catch the last name, but there was Jim there. And he, ¿cómo se apellidaba? Jim?
Rorabout. Or Rorabout.
Okay. And so he asked, do you have beavers here? And they said, no, why? And there's a tree over there that looks like had a beavers visitor. And so they went across the river, they got so excited and they started putting the trap cameras. And that was, this one here is the first photo image that we got of a dam of the beavers. And that's how we found out that we had beavers. And so that was the reason for many, many celebrations we had. And finally, we were sure that we had the beavers. And the dam showed that they were there. And then after that, I moved away. And so now I'm gonna ask Mario he has some stories to tell us, to share with us.
And before we go into there, I just want to emphasize that Antonio was the first Los Fresnos manager after TNC got that, and this is the first of Beaver's presence in Los Fresnos. So that's that's very high relevance right there. And right after that, Antonio moved on to do other things with TNC. But it's very nice to see that from Ironwood beaver to real beavers in the same amount of time when Antonio was there. Thank you, Antonio, for sharing that.
When was that beaver captured? When did they first appear in Los Fresnos?
¿Cuándo se tomó esa foto? ¿Es la de 2016 o de 2004?
2006.
September
2006.
15th of 06.
It's a date.
So that is the real date, yeah. So Mario, do you want to add any, Mario, ¿quieres agregar un poquito más de color antes de pasar con Carlos sobre ese periodo también, que tú también estabas presente ahí, pero sí me gustaría oír de qué es lo que te atrajo, qué es lo que te atrae incluso todavía de trabajar con los castores en Sonora?
Mira,
So
yo
the
comencé a trabajar.
question with
Okay.
Mario is, I want to hear from Mario as well about that period, but also what, re-emphasizing that question, of what attracts you to work with beavers? Why do you love beavers in Sonora? So here is Mario.
Well, bueno, voy a hablar en español mejor. Yo comencé a trabajar con el Centro Ecológico de Sonora en 1992. Llegué a la región noreste del estado, trabajando con búho manchado mexicano. Cuando estaba en el área de Cananea, alguien me dijo en Cananea, en Cuenca de San Pedro hay unos animalitos raros. Se parecen Juancitos, pero más grandotes. Me di tiempo y llevé a la persona que me llevara al sitio donde había visto. Eran perritos de la pradera. Perritos de la pradera de cola negra. Después, con el tiempo, vimos que eran las últimas 4 colonias en ese entonces. Ahora queda solo una. Y ahí me enamoré de la cuenca del San Pedro. Caminé los arroyos, caminé tributarios de la cuenca principal. Después de ecológico entré a trabajar a la reserva Ajos y propusimos el área como sitio Ramsar. Hicimos muchos estudios, muchas caminatas, y en 2004 entramos por primera vez el primer registro de señas de castor en el área. Cuando yo vi las señas, yo sabía habían sido reintroducidos al San Pedro Binational Conservation Area en 99. Estamos en contacto con ellos. Yo entré a la reserva en 96, entonces había una relación con los parques del otro lado, precisamente con Coronado National Memorial, Chicagua National Monument, y tuve un acercamiento con la gente de BLM en la oficina en Sierra Vista, que fueron los que introdujeron los castores. Platicando de este primer registro, mandé la fotografía a Sierra Vista y me dijeron, no, sí, son castores. Y comenzamos a caminar el río y ya comenzamos con los proyectos de sitio, proyectos de restauración en la cuenca, haciendo acciones de conservación, haciendo exclusiones ganaderas alrededor del río. El CEDES y Limades entonces haciéndolo y nosotros también. Okay,
dame chancita, Mario. ¿Estás lista, Graciela? Dime si te puedo ayudar también.
Ándale, a ver, lo que me brinca ahí me dice, pero basically Mario is saying that he started working at Centro Ecológico Sonora in 1992, and he covered basically the northeast side of the state, and so he was in Cananea, and while he was in Cananea, someone said that there were some weird animals there, some strange animals, and so they look like prairie dogs, but they were a little bit weird. And so first chance he had, he invited this person to take him to go over, and so yeah, indeed he found some black-tailed big animals there, and he over time he was able to record 3 colonies of these beavers, and he just fell in love with them. And so he started working with them, walking the mainstream of the, or basin of the river, and started in 1996, he started working at the Reserva. I don't know which one it was.
Ajo.
In Ajo. Okay, and so by 2004, they got the first record of signs and of the presence of the beavers. By then, he knew that they had been reintroduced. And he knew that because he was working at the Reserva, that the National Parks and BLM at Sierra Vista had been working with them, and they were chatting. And so he shared the photo that he had of this. And then he continued talking about it and walking the basin and making observations. I don't know.
Algunas de las imágenes pueden ver aquí no son precisamente Pedro, son del Bavispe. Nosotros nos interesamos no únicamente castores de la cuenca de Río San Pedro, sino que hablamos con Valer Clark, quien es la dueña de los predios de Cuenca de los Ojos. Ella estaba interesada en reintroducir castores y decía, bueno, que la autoridad hagan algo para traslocar castores a Cuenca de los Ojos. Colaborar con Naturalia, con su gente. Comenzamos a ver los censos para determinar cuáles son las poblaciones que podíamos traslocar a aquella zona. Yo salí de la CONAM, de la Comisión de Áreas Naturales Protegidas, en 2015. Sin embargo, ya fuera, continuamos trabajando en otros sitios, en este caso en la cuenca del río Bavispe. En Río Bavispe, yo tenía registros de castor de que yo era niño. Yo me crié en Acosario, un pueblo en Narón, y cerca de ahí el Rispe cruza el municipio. Estas fotografías son de esa zona, ¿no? Yo tenía un registro de hace 32 años en la zona de Juriquipa, entre municipios de Villahidalgo y Nuzari. Me acuerdo que nos aventábamos del río junto con un cortado que parecía que lo habían cortado nachas y no estábamos por un castor. Ese está abajo de la presa La Angostura. Eso permite inferir que los castores estaban ahí desde antes de 1976. El río Bavispe tiene aproximadamente 325 kilómetros de longitud, de Mesa de Tres Ríos, desde el rancho Tres Ríos, hasta la confluencia con el Faros, cuando se convierte en río Yaqui. Son más o menos 202 millas, para que se den una idea. Está cortada por la presa Angostura. De la confluencia del río Aros a la Angostura es el Bajo Bavispe. De la Angostura a Chocóbora en Guachinera es el medio Bavispe, la parte media del río. Y de Coya en Guachinera hasta Tres Ríos es el Alto Bavispe. En esa Mario, zona, ¿sí?
Antes de seguir, mencionaste algo muy interesante desde ¿qué tiempo se registraron los castores en el río Bavispe? ¿Fue antes de 1999?
Antes de 1999. Yo tengo un registro, bueno, no es un registro como tal, es un tom de un álamo de aproximadamente 1 metro de diámetro, cortado por castores. Nosotros nos subíamos a ese tom para aventarnos al río a nadar. Ese registro, te estoy hablando, yo estaba en secundaria, te estoy hablando del 79, 1979, 1979, so it's a very good record. I think
¿Puedo interferir ahí, Graciela?
Sure.
It's very interesting. Mario is telling us that in the Rio Bavispe that is right here on this image, I mean, he has records of late 1970s, 1979, for presence of beavers in this stretch of this river system in Sonora. That is way before 1999, when the Bureau of Land Management introduced beavers in the San Pedro. So it's very interesting to see that there are records, or there are signs of beaver presence back to early 1980s. I just wanted to mention that. No sé si quieras agregar un poquito más, Graciela. Y después, Mario, lo siento, pero sí me gustaría pasar con Carlos de Natural.
Va, no hay problema. Adelante.
Well, basically what he was saying is that the images that he was showing, he was going through, showing other areas. They are not only interested in one area or one, but it's in different places. And so they went to visit Valeria Clark from Cuenca Los Ojos, and she got interested. And so she invited to do something and to determine what's the population of beavers over there. By 2000, Mario left Conam and started working at other places. But, well, he grew up in Nacosari, and so he knew it, and he had records of the river, and he knew the Juriquipa and other places. And a lot of the effects are from the dam, a Langostura Dam, but Rio Avispe, for example, he said it's 3 kilometers long, and it goes from Mesa to up to 3 rivers, and then that goes up to down to Rio Yaqui. So you can get an idea. It's 202 miles there,
So,
and it's cut by Langostura Dam. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Okay.
just very muy rapidito, Mario. Estas banderitas rojas que estamos viendo aquí son avistamientos de castores.
Son registros confirmados del castor, ya por huellas o árboles, madrigueras. Incluso encontramos nutrias. Está lleno de nutrias este río.
Wow. Y no tienen nada que ver con los castores del San Pedro.
No tiene nada que ver. Es la misma subespecie. Juan Pablo Gallo ya hizo un estudio genético, pelo, y lograron determinar que es la misma subespecie que reintrodujeron en la parte alta del San Pedro en Sierra Vista.
I'm asking Mario here if all these little red flags that are there are sightseeing of presence of beavers on the Bavispe River, and yes, they are. And it's very interesting that they date all the way back to the 1980s, and they don't have anything to do with the populations of the San Pedro. So it's a totally different, it's the same species, but it's totally different tribe, to call it like that, of beavers in another river system. For me, that's fascinating. That's very, very, very interesting that 3 rivers, 3 beaver presence in Sonora. Gracias, Mario. Y sí me gustaría cambiar un poquito e irme un poquito más a la experiencia personal con Carlos. Carlos, tú tienes muchas historias, te has acercado mucho a los castores, has estado con ellos, los has atrapado, los has movido, te han hecho travesuras también a ti. ¿Qué es lo que te atrae de esta especie, de estos castores? I'm moving now with Carlos from Naturalia, and he has a lot of close encounters with beavers. I mean, the pictures that he's been showing us, and Lisa, we can go back to just after Antonio, those are Carlos' pictures. And anyway, Carlos has been very intimate with beavers. And so I'm asking him, what attracts you of these wonderful species on beavers? Adelante, Carlos.
Pues yo estudié en la Universidad de Sonora la carrera de biología, y es verdad que siempre me gustaron los mamíferos. A mí me gustaron mucho. En mi escuela solo hay una profesora que era pues experta en mamíferos, la doctora Reina Castillo. Fue cuando yo me acerqué a ella pues para hacer la tesis. Yo pues desconocía un poco sobre las especies de aquí. Yo no sabía qué especies teníamos en México o en Norteamérica. Fue con ella cuando me acerqué y ella me recomendó hacer una tesis con ardillas, con la ardilla gris de Arizona, Cirrus arizonensis. Y pues fue así como que me fue gustando un poco los mamíferos de aquí. Fui leyendo un poco. Las ardillas son de mis especies favoritas porque hay mucha variedad de ardillas. Hay como 9 especies en Sonora, desde ardillas arborícolas hasta terrícolas, hasta los perritos de la pradera. No sé si la traducir eso.
Graciela.
Okay, so this she's saying that he studied biology by trade at the university, and he studied mammals. Basically, and one of his professors advised him to make his research and his thesis to graduate as a research on squirrels. And so he was studying the squirrels from Arizona, and the squirrels are his favorite species. There are 9 different species that he can recognize, and he mentioned all of them, up down to the prairie dogs.
Pero esto no es una ardilla, este es un castor, canijo. ¿Cómo llegaste con los castores?
Ahí va, pues es el preámbulo.
This is not a squirrel, but he's gonna say how he
es
got
el
to this.
intro. Y fue así como conocí la cuenca del río San Pedro, porque, o sea, aparte de la ardilla esta, mi profesora trabajaba mucho con los perritos de la pradera, y así fue como por varios años fui a ayudarle a hacer los monitoreos de los perritos de la pradera en la cuenca del río San Pedro, en la colonia La Mesa, así se llama la colonia que antes existía de perritos de la pradera. Ahí fue cuando conocí la cuenca del río San Pedro y sobre todo pues el rancho Los Fresnos, que en ese entonces y pues actualmente todavía lo administra la organización Naturalia. Así fue cuando ahí pedíamos permisos para quedarnos en la casa del rancho de la Reserva Los Fresnos. Y dentro del rancho, la casa se encuentra como en una loma que está arriba de un represo muy grande, así es como un lago muy bonito, porque cuando bajas al represo se puede ver que se refleja la montaña de las Huachucas que está en Estados Unidos y tiene un paisaje muy impresionante. Fue ahí cuando también con Naturalia íbamos a talleres que organizaba la organización, como monitoreo de murciélagos, de anfibios y reptiles. Así conociendo ya el rancho fue cuando pues íbamos ahí nos quedábamos en esta casa, y es cuando por las tardes escuchábamos de repente unos trancazos en el agua, así que nos espantaban en la noche, decíamos ¿qué onda con eso? Y fue cuando ya pues comentando con los administradores nos decían, no, es que son los castores. Y yo, ¿castores? ¿A poco hay castores aquí? Ya fue cuando, pues así poco a poco, me interesaron mucho, pues, o sea, fuimos, yo y mis amigos que en ese entonces íbamos, pues recorrimos ahí el represo acá, hasta que los pudimos ver en el crepúsculo de la tarde, verlos nadar acá y cómo nos miraron a nosotros y más coletearon más fuerte y se metieron en el agua.
So he said that how he met the San Pedro Basin is over 10 years working with the prairie dogs and making a survey for his professor at the Rancho Los Fresnos Ranch, and which is part of Naturalia. So he spent a lot of time at the house, and that's where they were camping or spending overnight. And so there is a very large dam or represo over there, and there's an amazing landscape over there. It was just beautiful, and that's where they were monitoring bats and reptiles and other fauna over there. And in the evenings, when they went to sleep, they just hear some noises and water splashing, and they didn't know what was going on. So they wonder what's happening, and they went and asked the people there, the workers, and they said, oh, it's the beavers that live there. And then, what, beavers? Okay. So his friends and himself, they went and looked for the beavers, and that's how they found them, that they were there.
So, entonces, Carlos, ustedes, los castores y tú, se vieron a los ojos, ustedes dos.
Los vi, me vieron.
So in Los Fresnos, you look at the eye of the beaver and you hear the sound of the beaver. So that's where you got enchanted, captured by these creatures in Sonora, in Los Fresnos. I really like that story. Me encanta esa historia de cómo se vieron a los ojos, oíste las colas de los castores castores y así es como empezó tu travesía.
Sí, y pues saliendo ya de la carrera, pues fui a buscar trabajo, pues a varias organizaciones, entre ellas naturales, pues ya me ubicaban de cuando me ubicaban de que iba con mi profesora o que iba a los talleres que organizaban. Fue cuando pues me dieron trabajo para trabajar hace 6 años que trabajo en la organización. Y pues mi primer trabajo ya en la organización fue ir al rancho y quedarme ahí un fin de semana. Y ¿sabes qué? Te vas a levantar a las 5 de la mañana, te vas a ir al represo con unos binoculares y vas a observar cuántos castores hay, si hay crías, si hay hembras. Entonces era ahí levantarnos así en la madrugada, así con el frío de aquel entonces, y estar observando pues en el amanecer. Aparte también a las 5 de la tarde, entre 5 y 7 de la noche también era volver a ver si miramos la actividad de los castores, pues ahí es donde observamos, pues en aquel entonces a mí me tocó así de que envié ver 5 castores nadando en ese entonces ahí en el represo, ver las crías y también pues recorrer el represo registrando los árboles roídos que dejaban como rastro los castores. Ahí fue pues, de las pocas veces que me ha tocado que los castores roban encinos. En otra parte de los arroyos que he recorrido no me ha tocado ver, pero ahí en el represo, a los alrededores del represo, hay árboles de encino y en aquel entonces sí me tocó ver los roídos por los mismos castores, pues, por un poco la escasez que hay de álamos en esa parte del represo. Hay muy pocos como en la entrada del represo.
So, well, continue with the story. After graduation, he looked for work at Naturalia, and of course, he got the job there. So for 6 years, he's been working there, and he was assigned to work at the ranch. And so he had to start working very hard, go early in the morning, like 5 in the morning, to survey and monitor to see if there are families, if there were some adults or babies, and that, and also to go and check in the evenings. And so he got lucky to see one time 5 beavers swimming in the basin there in the river. And so he loved just going around, you know, and the represo in the area and finding signs. And they didn't know what when they found some oaks that were yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just got excited with this image. Let's stop there a little bit. Porque sí tengo una pregunta quizá muy íntima, muy especial para el Carlos. Y no sé si sea cierto, si sea leyenda, si sea mentira. Pero el Carlos, creo... ¿Qué pasó en tu brazo con estos dientes, Carlos?
Pues tengo como mi herida de guerra por agarrar un castor y pues me mordió. ¿Y qué se llama? Pues tengo aquí la cicatriz, las 2 marcas de una de las capturas que hicimos de los castores. Pues tenemos un proyecto, pues es un proyecto que Naturalia ha tenido colaboración con médicos veterinarios de la UNAM, con la CONAM, con Cuenca Los Ojos, la organización de Valer Clark. Pues es un proyecto en el cual hemos estado capturando algunos castores dentro de la cuenca del río San Pedro que tienen problemáticas con los ganaderos. Muchas veces los llegan a matar por la problemática de que les tuman los árboles, que el ganadero dice, me sirve de sombra para el ganado y le está tomando la sombra a mi ganado. Entonces prefieren matar a los castores a que le tomen la sombra a su ganado.
Ok. Entonces sí es cierto que te mordió un castor.
Sí.
¿Y estos son los dientes que te mordieron o no?
Este es lo maté, no se mentira. No, sí, pues
muy bien.
Fue pues en el brazo, pues fue ese que capturamos, ese castor, pues no sé, les cuento la historia. Generalmente los capturamos como en la foto esta que sale con trampas Tomahawk o con trampas Bailey de maleta, pero como una de lo más eficaz que hemos realizado en colaboración con los veterinarios, estos de la y pues el equipo de Naturalia, es capturarlos con redes de mano, con redes así como de mariposas muy grandes, con hilos como para pescar. Entonces es como una cacería dentro del agua con estas redes. Entonces estamos ahí metidos como si estuviéramos jugando ahí hockey en el agua, pero capturando castores.
Graciela, ¿puedes ayudarnos ahí? ¿Dónde está Graciela?
I think we might have lost Graciela.
Okay,
I think we lost her.
All right, it's fine. When we had the teeth of the beavers, I asked Carlos, because it is a legend, it is a story, or maybe it's a lie, but he got bitten by that beaver when he was removing those beavers to Cuenca Los Ojos. And so he has that scar right there on his arm, and he's so proud of that. And that's a great story. So anyway, so it is true. I didn't know that was a true fact. Yeah, they can bite you, and he survived. He's fine. He's so proud of that bite. Pero también, Carlos, ya para terminar, nos mandaste un mapa de todo México. You sent us a map of the whole country of Mexico and the borderlands. What is that? What are we seeing there? ¿Qué es lo que nos muestra ese mapa? ¿Qué es lo que estamos viendo?
Pues es un mapa que yo realicé con registros de naturalista, pues de la aplicación esa de registros recientes que han tenido de castores. Aparte le agregué algunos que no están en la página, pero más o menos yo, pues con la experiencia que he tenido, pues más o menos fui como englobando a los castores como por poblaciones más o menos. Entonces, por ejemplo, desde la cuenca del río San Pedro, el número 2, que es donde pues, trabajamos con Naturalia, o el número 4, que es donde Mario ha trabajado en la cuenca del río Avispe, o el número 3, que es donde hemos llevado los castores capturados, los hemos allá en los ranchos de Cuenca Los Ojos, en la DBC Los Ojos de Valer Clark. Y hace poquito, algo que me sorprendí porque lo he leído en artículos del doctor Juan Pablo Gallo, es de que antes había poblaciones en el río Colorado. Yo pensé que ya no había, porque he cruzado muchas veces de San Luis del río Colorado a Mexicali y el río está seco, pues el agua se queda en las presas de Estados Unidos y casi no baja el agua hacia México. Y me sorprendió ver que hay registros recientes de castores ahí en la cuenca pues, del río Colorado, en esa parte, pero están como más hacia el lado de Mexicali, del Valle de Mexicali, en los campos de agricultura. Y pues a algunas otras poblaciones que he ido más o menos en otros estados como en Chihuahua, en Coahuila o en Nuevo León. Hasta me sorprendió que en Nuevo León, dentro de la ciudad de Nuevo León, acabo de estar ahí hace como una semana, y hay un río, el río Santa Catarina, y hay registros de castores muertos en la vía pública. O sea, que se trataron de cruzar el camino, trataron de cruzar la calle por ahí, por el río Santa Catarina, y hay registros de castores. Entonces, este mapa es más o menos englobando lo que yo creo que serían pues, poblaciones de castor a lo largo de México, pues más o menos englobando en subcuencas hidrológicas en México.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that, Carlos. This is from a list, natural list in Mexico. Those are sightseeings of castores along the border between the US and Mexico. We've been talking about Area 2, Area 3, and Area 4. That's pretty much in Sonora. But he recently was over here on Area 10. And Monterrey is a big city right there downtown. They've been evidence of beavers in Monterrey, in that city. Con eso, quiero darle las gracias a Antonio, a Mario y a Carlos. Hay mucho más de qué platicar, yo sé. But with that, I want to thank you so much for your wisdom, for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your experience. I know there is a lot more to talk about. And so thank you for being part of the International Beaver Day and we'll continue talking, we'll continue working, and we'll continue collaborating with all of you. Okay, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Graciela, for interpreting for us. It looks like you're back on. I see we've got Trevor. There were a bunch of questions that came in during that. So if our guests could look at the questions in the chat, but hopefully we can get to some of them later. I also wanted to share, let's see if I can do this. Share a photo that Antonio sent me of the reservoir that I think Carlos was referring to. So here we go. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little small if you want to zoom in.
Okay, let's see what I can do.
So
yeah.
That is Los Fresnos Lake. You can see the main house at the right. At the end, you can see the Huachucas, the American side of the border.
And in the left arm of the reservoir, where we found the first beaver.
So if we want to do the second International Beaver Day, there's nothing that stops us to do it there.
Ask Gerardo.
Ask Gerardo.
Gerardo, Carlos, there are some people here. All right, we'll talk about that.
Ahí está Gerardo.
Gerardo.
Ahí está
Está
Gerardo.
hablando si la próxima reunión puede ser aquí.
Gerardo,
Fresno.
¿no te escuchas?
Claro que sí, seguro podemos organizar algo y podemos ver todos a los castores invitados cordialmente de parte de Naturalia y de TNC, que son los dueños del rancho Los Fresnos.
That'll be great.
Muchas
Gracias,
gracias.
Gerardo. And let's work on that. Let's celebrate the presence of beavers in Sonora and in Arizona, and particularly in Baja Arizona and Northern Sonora. Muchas gracias de nuevo y gusto en verte, Gerardo, aquí en la pantalla. Bueno, apenitas te ves, pero está bien.
Yes, thank you
Ya
so
te ves,
much.
ahora sí.
And if you can stay on and add to the answer the questions in the chat, and I think also at the end we'll have some time, but this is great just to see the stories being swapped here tonight. We have Trevor on. Lauren, can you share your screen of where we're at in our presentation? And all right, so Trevor is quote unquote in the field. Trevor, where are you? You're not on my screen right now. Oh, there you are. Okay, so I'm going to pin you here. Quote unquote in the field here because normally he is in the field. And in the case of tonight, that is out at our other event that's happening in person downtown Tucson at Westbound. But we did want to hear from Trevor because if we can go to the next slide, Trevor's really been the staff member who's been focused on this potential introduction to Las Cienegas National Conservation Area. So Trevor, tell us what we're looking at in this photo and where we're at with that project.
So welcome everybody. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I am down here at Westbound. It's a wild and woolly crowd. We've got about 25 Beaver believers and about 50 people we're trying to convince to be Beaver believers. They didn't know this was going on, but many of them are excited. So you're looking at right here at one of the reintroduction sites on Cienega Creek in Las Cienegas National Conservation Area. In the late 90s, the Arizona Game and Fish Department and the BLM did a habitat suitability analysis at the bequest of the BLM to look at if there was actually beaver habitat along Cienega Creek. And yes, indeed, there is beaver habitat. And as you can see from this photo, it's wonderful habitat. That pool right there in front of you is probably chest deep And it's probably 20, 30 feet wide where the water is flowing through there. So in that habitat suitability analysis, they found about 12 sites they thought, or 8 to 10 sites that they thought were suitable for beaver. They suggested that they put 5 family pairs in, or family units in, and then monitor them. And if the area seems like it could handle more beavers, we can put more beavers in there. And those beavers are coming from northern Arizona, where the mischievous little beavers are getting themselves in trouble. They're ending up in the Phoenix Basin, building ponds next to the airport and attracting waterfowl, or they're in the sewage treatment wetlands down there along the Salt River, clogging up the flow conveyances, or they're blocking off culverts under roads, but they're getting themselves in trouble, so they get relocated. And so we already talked to those guys that do those relocations, and they see no reason why we couldn't bring them down to Las Cienegas.
Can
We've
we
been in a lot
advance
of
to the next slide, Lauren?
We've been in contact, and this is our wonderful partner, Dennis Caldwell, graphic designer and illustrator, of what we hope Cienega Creek looks like after a beaver is reintroduced there and builds a dam. You'll hear later from Mike Foster about the beavers on the San Pedro. It's a much larger system than San Pedro, and a beaver builds a dam, it generally gets blown out every year by the floods. I think on Cienega Creek, we have a better chance to actually see a dam like this be built and persist our monsoon floods. So it'll be really interesting to watch this as this goes forward. So I spoke with the BLM biologist last week. She had just finished off the final rewrites of the environmental assessment. The environmental assessment analyzes the impacts to both the natural and the human environment, and that's under the National Environmental Policy Act. So every federal action has to be analyzed under NEPA. And so the EA is kind of the middle tier of the analysis. It's not super intensive like an environmental impact statement, and it's not super easy like a categorical exclusion or determination of NEPA adequacy. So that has now been sent to her boss. Her boss will go make sure all her I's and T's are dotted, and then we'll sign off on it. And at that point, it goes to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they do a biological consultation where they analyze the impacts to listed species. So of course, the beaver is not a listed species as endangered or threatened, but Cienega Creek has quite a few species that are listed as endangered or threatened. They've got the Gila top minnow and the Gila chub. They've got the southwestern willow flycatcher and the yellow-billed cuckoo. They have the Mexican garter snake and the Chiricahua leopard frog. All of these critters, these riparian critters that are listed on the creek, will benefit immensely from the reintroduction of beavers onto Cienega Creek. The only issue that we see arising is the non-native species in our region, especially the non-native fish and the non-native bullfrog. Both love ponds. And the bullfrogs and some of the non-native fish don't do really well in small desert streams. They hang on, but especially the bullfrogs needs ponded water to breed successfully and continue their presence. So there might be a little bit of pushback that we're creating habitat for invasive species. However, the BLM and the Frog Project of Cienega Watershed Partnership, along with a bunch of field biologists and researchers from the University of Arizona, have rid the Cienega Creek watershed, or the majority of it, of these non-native species. So they are not there to come into these ponds and repopulate. So we don't expect a lot of pushback. People will bring that up. But we fully expect that the public, you guys, are going to write letters of support during the public comment period. There is a public comment period. And Then we have tons of biologists from the U of A, from the BLM, from Game and Fish, from the Cienega Watershed Partnership, which is the watershed group down in that area, and the rancher in that area, and the stakeholders in that area are all beaver believers. So we're really excited about this. I expect that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service consultation will start here in the next month or so, take a month or two, and then another month to go up to the state office where the state BLM lead will then sign off on it. And then it's all up to Game and Fish to go work with APHIS, the federal agency that removes the problem beavers, and figure out which beavers are coming down to Cienega Creek. So we're super excited. Potentially, we could see beavers introduced in this year. If not this year, I fully expect by next summer we'll have beavers on Cienega Creek.
Thanks, Trevor. And I know for those of you who've been following this introduction for the last few years, we have said that before. We have said we could possibly see this introduction this year. So we're hopeful that this is the year potentially, but I know things slowed down quite a bit with COVID across all the agencies. So I know that put a little bit of a bump in the road, but we are hopeful that this is moving forward again and that this is still on the table. So I want to have you share a little bit, if we could advance to the next slide, about some of the on-the-ground restoration work that WMG is heading up in the Cienega Creek watershed.
So for the past 3 years, we've been working with Arizona Department of Environmental Quality on a water quality improvement grant program. And in the Cienega Creek watershed, while it's not an impaired water, which is a federal designation that brings money into the state to try to stop that impairment, and that can be heavy metals, that can be E. coli, that can be sediment. In the Cienega Creek watershed, the creek itself was at risk of being impaired by sediment and E. coli. E. coli comes from cow poop, and cow poop gets washed into these systems, and everything is so eroded. All the tributary drainages to Cienega Creek are so eroded that there's tons of sediment, which means there's a ton of cow poop coming into the system. So our approach, you can see on this slide here, is to slow the flow of that runoff down in the tributary drainages to Cienega Creek, soak that water into the ground, hold the sediment in these one rock dams. And that sediment, not only does it have E. coli in it, it also has seeds in it. So we're also promoting the growth of riparian, mostly grasses in these drier systems. But the system in Pyre Gulch is just full of deer grass, which is one of the greatest grasses in riparian areas because it's so robust, it really holds banks together. So we started in the Cienega Creek Natural Preserve that Pima County owns and manages, and worked on 3 sites there in tributary drainages to slow the water down and to sink it into the ground, add more water to the base flow of Cienega Creek as it flows through the preserve. And if nobody's been to the preserve, it's 15 minutes outside of Tucson. Go to the Gabe Zimmerman Trailhead. It's a wonderful place to visit. And the other thing about the Cienega Creek Natural Preserve, Pima County's Cienega Creek Natural Preserve, is the habitat isn't quite there yet. It's only been 20 years since they removed cattle from the riparian area along Cienega Creek. So the riparian habitat is still developing. It's also a drier part of the Cienega Creek watershed. Out of about 10 miles of creek that's in the preserve, only 2 or 3 miles of it really flows year round. But if we slow more water down, sink it into the ground, we are going to extend the length of that base flow.
So Trevor, I know you have a toast in mind that I think we need to get towards the toast so we can get on to our next speaker. And Lauren, if you go through the next slides, we have a little build of a one rock check dam. Now I'll cue you when to go to the next one, but you might notice on the left side of this photo, there is a little beaver there. So Beto, the beaver, went out with us on one of these weekends to oversee these One Rock check dams that Trevor was just describing. So if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide, Trevor, you can narrate what's happening here. If you can see this.
I can barely see it, but luckily I moved out from the crowd. So we build these One Rock dams. We're pretending we're beavers out there. We're human beavers. We're using rock where a beaver would use riparian or would use cottonwood and willow cuttings, but we're doing the same thing. We're slowing the water down. We're trying to get it ponded up behind this rock dam. And so here we've dug a footer down and we have to remove the sand that scours. So when this arroyo is flowing, it's not just flowing on the top of the sand. The sand is part of the water column and is moving downstream also. So we need to dig a footer row and put these giant 18 to 36 inch boulders as a footer row into this start the One Rock Dam.
Let's go to the next slide.
I think we're looking upstream here. So we've laid our footer row down here. And then the next step is to channel your, so I tell people that this restoration work, the construction of these low-tech, ancient erosion control and water control features, it's art and science, but really it's more about the art. So what you have to do is you have to start channeling your inner mason as you place the rocks, one rock at a time, rows and rows, and we only put one rock. We don't put a rock on top of the other one because then it isn't sitting firmly in the earth and anchored in the earth to the footer row and doesn't have a chance to be dislodged and roll downstream.
Thanks for walking us through that, Trevor. I think we're going to do a little toast. And I haven't done my job because I'm supposed to be encouraging you all to donate tonight. So I know many of you already have donated to our Release the Beavers campaign, and it culminates tonight. Our goal is to raise $75,000 by the end of the night tonight. I think we're still 9,000 or 10,000 shy from that. But we've got a really easy way for people to give. Lauren or Chloe, if you could drop that in the chat, there you can actually text Beavers, or I think it's Chloe or Lauren's going to jump in. It's really simple text to make a donation. We're still trying to raise that final 9,000 or 10,000 tonight. So if you haven't gotten a chance to give, your donation supports future monitoring efforts, coordinating that monitoring with all these new partners that we're so excited to be talking to tonight, the restoration on the ground, as well as advocating for additional beaver releases and all the education of the communities to get the community on board with that. So let's see, did we get that in the chat yet? Yes,
yep,
so you're
Beavers,
just
70, 70, 70.
Yes, so you just send a message to 707070 and Beavers in the text, and you will be taken to our donation page. So we'll put that in there again. But Trevor, do you have a toast for us tonight from Westbound?
So I just love the saying that our friends in Sonora shared with us. So, no tractores, si castores, or si castores, que tractores. Cheers! And I forgot to bring my drink with me when I walked away. Cheers!
Cheers.
Mejor castores que tractores, like Antonio says. Say it, Antonio.
Yeah, we don't need.
Es mejor tractor que castor.
Es mejor castor que tractor. Muy bien, salud.
Salud. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Trevor.
Have fun.
Okay. This has been great. We are now moving on to Allison. So Allison gets to work with beavers over at the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum as the staff member over there, one of the zookeepers. So if we could go to the next slide, we have some photos that Allison has shared. If you want to maybe Allison, if you want to just let Lauren know when you're ready to advance.
Okay. So this is a wild beaver that I got to see in the Tetons years ago. Even though I get to work with beavers on a almost daily basis, you know, it's still a thrill to see them in the wild. So you can go ahead and move on to the next. So this is our current beaver that we have on exhibit. She is 7 years old. And like most of the animals that we have at the museum, they come from situations where they can't be released back into the wild. So she came from a South Carolina rehab center before she came to the museum. So as a keeper, I'm in charge of their daily feeding, cleaning, enrichment, you know, helping with veterinary procedures. So I'm basically room service and housekeeping for this beaver. This is some enrichment that we made for her. You can see there's a log that we've drilled some holes into and then added some cottonwood branches, which is one of her favorite treats. You can go ahead and move to the next one. So there she is again on the shore. And then this is the Golden Beaver Tail Award that she made for Joaquin for his excellent, him and Christian's excellent portrayal of a beaver on screen of Beto and Carmen Beaver. She's pretty relaxed around people. She was hand raised, so she doesn't seem to mind us being in there with her. She'll pretty much do anything for a sweet potato. There's nothing that beats a sweet potato in her eyes. If you don't arrive with her sweet potato on time, there is much complaining. And so this is just one of the things that we do for her. This is her passed out in her viewing den, which is where you're going to find her most of the day since they are nocturnal. Passed out, you can see those big teeth in the front there that are constantly growing. So we give her lab blocks and lots of wood to chew on. You can see those huge hind feet. They're actually, you don't really realize how big their back feet are because they're usually swimming or underneath them. They've also got a special preening nail on those back feet. So you can see how shiny her coat is. She'll sit in that den and use her back foot and her nail to kind of run the oil over all her fur and keep it nice and smooth. You can go ahead and move on to the next one.
So we have some videos that you shared of them eating.
Yes, there's, as a zookeeper, you end up with lots and lots of videos of animals doing adorable things. So this is just some videos of her eating and sweet potatoes, which is her favorite. She's also, I wanted to say that since she's been the star of the Release the Beavers video campaign, that she now does not get out of the den for less than 10 sweet potatoes a day. Which not actually that many, but you know, she refuses to get out of bed for less than her fair share.
Lauren, can you go ahead and just start all those videos at the same time?
I don't know why when humans are eating, you know, it's such an awful noise, but when animals are doing it, it's just adorable.
So does she have a name?
So we don't usually give out public names to animals. We may have a naming contest later on for her. But she is one of 4 beavers that I've had the pleasure of working with at the museum. Before her, we had 2 that actually lived into their 20s. In the wild, they might live until they're 10, 16, but in captivity, they can live easily into their 20s.
Wow. Well, based on your experience working with beavers, what would you say is typical beaver behavior? What do they do? Other than eating and sleeping?
Yeah, because you know we're there mostly during the day. That's what we see the most of is her napping in the den or you know coming in for her food. When we do work our Saturday summer evenings, cool summer nights, that's the best time to see her active out in her pool swimming around. But it also depends on the beaver. These are very different than a wild beaver because they're in that hand-raised captive situation. She's definitely the most social out of all the ones I've worked with. She seems to like being around people and comes in to find you, whereas other ones were either standoffish or indifferent to your presence.
Do you have from her or other past beavers any favorite stories?
She did run at me when I was on the shore trying to feed her once, and I did have to run away from a beaver.
That could be a little scary.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering if hearing the stories tonight and learning about the beavers in the borderlands, if you would speculate on any theories you have about beavers moving from southern Arizona into Mexico, why they might be moving and how they might be moving.
Well, they're probably, I think that maybe they're looking for new territory. The young are leaving. The distance that they travel, though, walking is pretty impressive because they're not very fast on land or very agile on land. So it'd be interesting to actually track one and see how far they can actually walk in a day, or, which ways that they are actually traveling across land.
Yeah, I wonder that same thing because they're not very fast outside of the water.
They're very awkward on land.
So it looks like there's some questions in the chat. Choi is wondering, are there plans to find another beaver in need of a friend for her?
Not right now. We had another beaver in the past, but it just kind of depends what's available through rehab situations. We don't want to go take one from the wild. They're an animal that we can get that may need a home, so it just kind of depends on that.
Okay, and there was a previous question asking, Cheryl was asking if beavers are solitary.
No, a male and female will live together, and then with their kits from that year, and then the beavers from the previous year. So maybe up to 8 in a den because they'll have 4 kits at a time usually.
And then Cheryl's following up asking about artificial insemination to reproduce and help repopulate in the wild. So are you familiar with any efforts? Is there a need to do that? Do we have enough wild beavers for?
I think there's enough wild ones that can be like the nuisance beavers that can be relocated. I think that there's plenty of those that can be removed rather than breeding more.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's the impression I've gotten, at least so far too. But that is an interesting question. Any other questions for Allison? Please go ahead and put them in the chat. And let's see. I think those were all of my questions. Allison, any last stories you want to share from the beavers you get to work with?
They are one of my favorite animals. They're a lot of fun. I love their different personalities. It's fun to, put all their food out there and make them pick everything up with those little hands. And they kind of carry them with their little T-Rex arms back into the den. So they're a fun animal to watch and be around.
Actually, I do have another question. So I've seen several photos, quite a few, where it looks like the beaver's smiling. There is a really good one, I think, that Carlos shared.
Yeah.
Of holding a beaver. It literally looks like it's smiling. So do beavers just smile naturally? Is that like
I think that's just how they're shaped.
Okay. Yeah, it just looks like they're so happy. And well, they're being held by a human and being moved. They're probably not that happy.
No. Yeah, a restrained wild beaver is probably not the happiest.
Okay, good to know. All right, well, like I said, please put any questions that you all have for Allison on beaver behavior and habits and what they eat, etc., in the chat, and Allison will keep an eye on that. And it looks like Trevor's adding some commentary. So much great commentary in the chat here. I'm going to have to go back and look through it all. Thank you so much, Allison, for joining us here tonight. We are coming right along. It looks like we just have about a half an hour left of the evening. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us here tonight. And we look forward to sharing this content far and wide. The more we learn about beavers in the San Pedro and the Santa Cruz, the more excited we get for the potential for beavers to do so much more in our watersheds. So I'm really pleased to have our last two storytellers and speakers here, Mike Foster and Steve Merkley, who I've had the pleasure of working with in person. And this is where the story really began for WMG with our latest efforts is looking at the beavers that are in the San Pedro, looking at, as far as we knew when we started talking about this a couple of years ago, that population was happy and moving along. And then we had heard, well, wait, maybe there aren't so many beavers there anymore. So we started to dig into that and connected with Mike, who has been involved with the beavers in the San Pedro National Riparian Conservation Area since they were introduced in 1999. So if we could move to the next slide. I'm trying to remember what slides we have lined up. I think these are from Steve, but I wanted to start, yes, so this question actually first starts for Steve and Mike, is can you talk us through how the population survey has been done the last couple of years in the Sprinka?
I'll let Mike take that one.
I started with a video camera in about 2004, and I would walk the Sprinka just for the fun of it. And I would see cool things and I'd take video of it. And of course, one of the cool things I saw were the beaver dams. And so I have tapes back from 2004. And I developed a relationship with Marcia Radke, who is the biologist at the Bureau of Land Management. And I started sharing some of my images with her. And so I could tell her where to go to look for the dams, and found out that the BLM was doing a survey to find out how many beaver were on the river. And that just kind of became a little bit more formal over time. And then I made a concerted effort to walk the entire Sprinka from the international border all the way up to near to St. David, and see what I could find. So as you see in this picture, one of the best ways to do it is to walk right up the river channel, because you're going to see evidence there. You'll definitely see a dam if you're walking up the river channel. And the river isn't deep. In some of the deepest places, it's maybe up to your chest, but generally the vast majority of it's just less than knee high. But when Watershed Management Group came, it was just so much better. Actually, when Steve's students came, which I think was about 2 years ago, it was so much better to have more people, to have more eyes, because I went out with Lisa and Catlow and two other people, and they were just seeing things that I wasn't seeing. And it just makes sense that when you have more eyes, that you're going to find more evidence. And walking up the channel is good, but if you have people on the bank, that's where you're going to see evidence that the trees have been chewed on. So when I did it with the Watershed Management Group, we got on the banks as well as walk through the river, and that really helped. So, you just have to scour it and take your time. When I was doing it as a single person, I would tend to, I wouldn't say rush through it, but you just can't take in everything. And when you have 5 people, it's so much better, so much easier to do a better job. And we were doing the survey, I was doing the survey by myself, and it would take about 3.5 months. But I think maybe next year with Watershed Management Group's help, we could maybe knock it out in 1 month. And the big advantage to that is that 1 year when I was doing it, we got good rains and a flood came through and wiped out the dams. So our data wasn't very complete. So I really look forward to the help and really appreciate the help I got from Steve and his students from Cochise College and from Watershed Management Group. And then I'm hoping that, not only will we do it in November, but other people will come down and like Steve right now has a camera out that he goes and checks every so often. And maybe in the future, we can get some other people, maybe Steve would do it, or maybe some of the people from Watershed Management Group will take a camera and go and get the card out every so often and check, and we can monitor their beaver.
Yes, that's what we are so excited to help out with. I know we have a lot of volunteers who want to get out as well and help in any way they can with the monitoring. We did have to really limit it this last December because of COVID and keeping it to small groups. But absolutely moving forward, we want to get mobilized, interested community scientists as much as possible to help out with this, because it is a lot of work. And you do need multiple people kind of in the river channel and on the banks to really see what's going on. I want to walk through some of these photos. So Steve, I believe you shared some of these.
Yeah, so this first photo here is from last February, actually, about 2 weeks before the pandemic shut everything down. So we actually had 3 groups that day. Mike went out with a group of my students. This is the group that I went with. And then there was another group that went out on their own and just walked stretches of the San Pedro. And as Mike mentioned, this was a couple months after a really large flood event happened in November. And so we didn't really find much evidence, although Mike had found some dams earlier in the year. You can go to the next picture. Okay, so on the left there, this was from this past fall, and that's Mike and myself walking a long stretch of the San Pedro that was mostly dry at the time. There were some pools, and then as we got closer to Highway 90, which is where the San Pedro house is, then we started to see a lot more water, but we really didn't find much evidence on this stretch. But south of here we did. And so the picture on the right is of, you can see a bunch of trees that have been chewed down recently, and there's actually a set of 3 dams. So fairly close together. So probably one family group sharing that space that's near Hereford. And that's one of the places. And I did get some new cameras, Mike. So one of my cameras is going to go down to one of those dams. And so, yeah, that's going to be happening soon. And it's a very hard location to get into. And so, but luckily there is a trail you can kind of mountain bike on. And so now that I know where the dams are, I can kind of bypass some of the other stuff to put the camera up, but it's still not easy to get there. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a picture of a tree, the bottom of a tree that had been found on private property, and we have a camera on this gentleman's property that actually contacted the Friends of the San Pedro and said, "Hey, I think I have some beaver on my property," and so we came there, and I asked him if I could he was actually looking for someone to put a camera out on the dam. And so I contacted him. I said, actually, I have an extra camera because I'm doing another project with mammals and tracking their movements along some of the desert washes in the San Pedro. And so I had an extra one, and I put it up on the dam there near where this is. Interestingly enough, this tree, which the beaver had been going at really hard, they didn't actually cut down. You'll see in one of the upcoming photos the tree that they did take down in this area. And so this is a separate family group north of the original site. And when I went out with WMG in December, we actually went to this site. So I think it's the next photo. Yeah, so this is actually a photo of the dam. It looks a little bit different now. So I think I took this back I might have took this back in December, but there's actually another sort of a step down layer below this. And my camera is attached to a tree that's, if you see the bottom left of that photo there, it's focused in on that little part of the dam. Yeah, right, exactly right there. And then I think there's some photos of the beaver. And this is one of the other dams that's farther south. So we spent all day, almost all day, myself, Mike, and Frank walking through really thick grass, the invasive Johnson grass that's down there. Dead grass, but still, it was a slog getting through to get to these sites. Yeah, above our heads. And we got to these sites, and it was really rewarding to start finding the beaver sign and then see these dams pop up. And so I want to get a camera on one of these. There's 3 of them that are fairly close together. So that's the other set of dams that we found this fall. And then I think, okay, now this is the tree on the private property. So most of the Sprinka is continuous. It's managed by the BLM. It's a conservation area, but there are a couple of parts of the Sprinka that are private property. There's one down near Palominas, just north of the bridge that goes across in Palominas. And then there's another section that's just south of Charleston Road. It's just a little kind of neighborhood there, and there's some private property along there, and that's where this tree got taken down. So on the other side of the river, the beaver gave up on that tree that I showed you earlier, and they took down this cottonwood, and they used those leaves as a winter cache, basically food storage for the winter. And so it was cool to see this after I'd seen the photos of the beaver. Next slide, I think, is so you may have seen this photo before. This is one of the beavers popping up, interested in seeing what's going on. But yeah, the dam there is on the bottom right. And so it's the same dam as you saw earlier. And then I was really pleased to see that there was a pair. So if you go to the last photo, that there was actually a pair of beaver there. And so as you know, as you can see from the date on top, these were actually taken in December. I put out the cameras in late November, and the camera, it's just one camera. And I actually went to check it in February, and I checked it again this week. Actually, I was there on Monday just to see if the beavers were still around, and they are still there, moving around. I'm really hoping that they're going to have kits. But we'll see. And they may have kits already, but they just haven't gone in front of my camera yet. So I'm hoping that they go in front of my camera. But as you know, beavers are nocturnal, and so there are I have not seen any photos of them in daylight yet. Sometimes, if you're lucky, I've seen beavers before in other places, early in the morning or late at night, swimming around. But these beavers seem to be pretty secretive, and that may be a defensive mechanism against some of the predators in the area. I'm not really sure, but they're just coming out this is at 3:55 in the morning, as you can see from the timestamp. So they come out after dark, and that's when they're active. And I have some good photos and video of them actually repairing the dam in this location as well, which is kind of cool, bringing in sticks and branches to repair the dam. So it's been a lot of fun being involved in this project. Currently, I'm working on a manuscript to sort of describe the populations that we've found the last few years and historically from the data that Mike and the BLM have collected. And then I already mentioned in the chat to our collaborators in Sonora that I'd like to work with them on this manuscript to get a really good picture of what's going on in the whole watershed, not just on our side of the border. If we're just insular, if we look at the San Pedro watershed as like starting on the border of US Mexico and going north, you're missing a whole picture of what's happening in Mexico. It's one big, and that's why I'm glad we're having this event, because it's one big connected ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. I think I agree. That's the fascinating part here that we really want to dig into is what are the beaver populations along the entire stretch of the river. Before we kind of talk about that a little bit more, because I'm interested in hearing both Mike and Steve, your opinion on this. In terms of just looking at the Sprinka, so it's about a 40-mile stretch of protected riparian area. The population, from my understanding, it started with the introduction in 1999 and 2000 with 16 beaver. It reached a population of up to 100 to 150 beavers in 2010. And then based on surveys last year, 10 to 12 beavers, and this year maybe 12 to 15. So if you could share why you think the population fluctuated so much, why did it grow so quickly? Why might it have dropped off so quickly as well? So Mike, if you want to share your thoughts on that.
Well, animal populations have cycles, and I was doing a video early on with Chris Haas about the coati and the huachucas, and the numbers went so low that she had to end the study. And then since then, every once in a while I'll send her some reports from the huachucas, but the numbers start to go back up. And so that wasn't down at a river. The animals weren't depending on a river. The reason the beaver might have declined so much along the San Pedro, well, first of all, the reason they probably increased so much was because there was good habitat. I think back around 1999, the flows were a little bit better, and they were able to spread out, and there's lots to eat there, so there's plenty for them. But you know, we don't really know. So if we do get better monitoring, if people go out on the river, maybe we'll get some clues as to what's going on. You know, I heard that one live trap was found. I've heard there is one landowner down there who blames lots of things on the beaver, and I've heard him shooting guns down there. But you know, I've also found piles of intestine, and I hear that when the mountain lion will eat a beaver, it'll leave the intestines. So, you know, there's a whole variety of things. There could be diseases. You know, Trevor was talking about E. coli from cow droppings, and you know, then the drought certainly doesn't help. I see beaver taking up in these tiny little pools that remain. So, you know, a lot of people don't really realize about the river that it's quite dry. And I have some videos that show just how dry it is in June, and you'd be surprised. You know, they call it a perennial river, but you know, I don't quite see it that way. So when that happens, what do the beaver do? And you know, that's a huge question. A lot of times you see these nasty.
So Mike, do you think that, well, I guess, could you speculate how much of the declining population do you think is from predation and hunting versus beavers moving elsewhere?
Oh, I think most of it is probably, that's just my guess. I can't prove it at all, but I would think that most of it is from predation and drought and disease, and you know, predation, humans and mountain lions. They do travel, you know, I mean, people have always told stories about them surfing down the San Pedro River in flood events, or going up the San Pedro into Mexico. So we know that that happens too, and thank goodness they have. Apparently there's a greater population up on the Mexican side, which doesn't have as much of a flow as from the times that I've been up there, but you do have a few reservoirs of represas where, you know, like Los Fresnos, where the beaver could take refuge. So that, and then there are a couple more represas up there too. I think Las Nutrias is one of them, and I forget the other one, but you know, thank goodness we have a few of those places so that in drought years, the beaver can survive there. And then of course, the river goes, the headwaters of the San Pedro are Bear Creek that comes in from the Huachucas and feeds Los Fresnos. And the beaver have even gone up into the Huachucas, which is
yeah, that was one of the questions I saw in the chat, is asking about the strategy of introducing beavers more up into the mountains, into the real like headwaters of these watersheds. And it sounds like they've maybe found their way into some of the headwaters, but Steve or Mike, would you want to comment on that as a strategy of beavers more in the uplands of our riparian areas?
The flow is very temporary in a lot of those mountain streams. And so although you do have good flows at some points of the year, At other points, it's very dry. And so you're going to run into a lot of issues with, just like Mike said, with either predation or just not being in habitat that they can withstand. It's not like a mountain stream in the Rocky Mountains. It's much different in characteristics. So I think it would be difficult. I don't know what you think, Mike.
Yeah, I think it'd be very difficult. Bear Creek was doing pretty good for many years, but we've had such a drought recently that I was out there last year in the summer, and it was like, even after the monsoons, and it was totally dry. And there's one area where there's a little canyon, and the water was still there. And I found the beaver dam, which was substantial. I couldn't believe it, in such a tiny creek, but it was totally dry. It was totally dry behind that. And I have to feel that maybe the beaver went downstream into Los Fresnos.
Steve, what's your opinion on beavers migrating upstream into Mexico? Do you think how many beavers maybe have done that? I mean, we've heard a speculation of 40 to 50 beavers along the San Pedro, Mexico, that those beavers are coming from.
Yeah, I'm learning this for the first time as well. For most of you don't know, I've only lived here a few years, but I was chatting with a bunch of the scientists from Sonora in the chat, and they were estimating between 7 to 11 family groups, which is quite substantial. That puts the numbers in the 40s, 50s, and 60s on them. And so that's a lot healthier than what we've seen with our monitoring on the US side. And so how many of those came from the original population that was here in the US? I don't know. They've obviously had recruitment and reproduction over on the Mexico side, as they were saying in the chat. So a lot of those beavers probably have never been to the US. They were born in Mexico and they live there now. And maybe now it's possible that we have beavers from Mexico recolonizing into the US now, because in ecology there's this idea of source and sink populations that are providing most of the individuals could be in Mexico. From what I've seen, that kind of sounds like what's happening. And then the individuals going into the US, now we're seeing maybe repopulation going on. I don't know. We have some missing data, obviously, there from, between like 2012 and 2018 from Mike's data, that there wasn't really solid monitoring going on the US side. So it's possible that these individuals coming over, like the ones you see in this photo here, maybe they were born in Mexico and came over into the US.
Well, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard that idea yet. So I'm fascinated by this idea of maybe starting in the US, moving to Mexico, and now that population might be repopulating in the US. Can beavers today move from Mexico to the US? Is that even possible with the border wall?
Well, they're supposed, I don't know a ton about it, but they're supposed to open it during the monsoon season, and also when there's substantial rain. And if you go down to the San Pedro River right along the border, most of the year it's dry in that area. And so you're really only going to have connectivity when there is those monsoon flood type events. And so that's when you would expect them to be moving between the border. So if they do keep that fence open, then yeah, I think that they can definitely still move back and forth.
Joaquin, if you could help translate, and maybe Mario, and I see Mario and Carlos are still here. I'm not sure if Antonio is, but I'd love for you all to weigh in on this question. How are beavers moving from, or how do you think they were moving from the US into Mexico? Do you think that happened really early on, like that photo from 2006? Do you think there were a few beavers that migrated in early 2000 and that's it? Do you think there was a continuous flow? Do you have any idea on that?
Sí, Gerardo y Carlos y Mario, ¿cómo se vale especular también? O sea, ¿cómo creen que se hayan movido caminado estos castores de la población de 1999? ¿Cómo migraron hacia México? Si esa es la teoría que estamos siguiendo. Y estamos hablando también de ahora, a lo mejor las poblaciones de México pueden empezar a migrar a Estados Unidos. En fin, ¿cómo migran estos castores?
Los castores son muy territoriales. Y a medida que creciendo los grupos familiares van expulsando muchos, van expulsando hembras. Los castores pueden caminar grandes distancias fuera del agua sin problema. De esa manera quedaron de la cuenca del San Pedro a la cuenca de Santa Cruz. Los individuos que hemos encontrado en Santa Cruz, en San Lázaro, son San Pedro. Eso te dice que cómo se da ese movimiento. Así como llegaron para acá dispersándose de la primera liberación, a medida que se dan esas crisis, los animales van de regreso a Estados Unidos.
They are territorial animal, but then the families start growing and they start migrating, looking for better territories. And they can actually walk some pretty good distance, according to Mario. I mean, that's how the populations the sightings in the Santa Cruz happen, from populations that migrated from the San Pedro. And so, yes, I mean, there is great possibilities of these Mexican populations right now to migrate back into the San Pedro. So it's interesting how they keep moving. But my question to all of us is how are they looking for water? Are they looking for food? Why do they start moving?
And it looks like Gerardo raised his hand.
Sí, gracias. La experiencia que hemos tenido en Naturalia con el monitoreo de las colonias en los fresnos ha sido muy interesante. Como dice Mario, y a él le tocó en esos años 2006, tal vez después 2008, cuando llegaron los castores a la cuenca del río San Pedro y que se comenzaron a registrar en los fresnos, como mencionó Toño. La idea fue que en ese año, 2005-2006, las lluvias torrenciales favorecieron que algunos individuos pudieran haber desplazado hacia la cuenca del San Pedro en Sonora, porque bueno, generalmente este río, en la mayor parte del año, el agua es interrumpida, pero durante lluvia se conecta. Ahora, nosotros cuando hemos estado trabajando en todos los arroyos que hay en los fresnos, que son el arroyo Los Fresnos, es uno de ellos donde más registros tenemos, pero también pegados frente a las montañas Huachucas, en un arroyo que nace ahí en Los Fresnos, un manantial agua dulce, que generalmente es un área que está seca casi todo el año o tiene una lámina de agua muy pequeña. Y ese registro fue en el año aproximadamente 2014. Llegó una familia, una pareja de castores y se estableció en ese punto a tan solo más o menos 1 kilómetro de la frontera frente a las Huachucas, donde no hay un muro, pero sí hay una barrera de vías de ferrocarril, y que posteriormente con colaboradores de Sky Island Alliance que estuvieron trabajando en las Huachucas, en una poza de agua registraron un castor. Entonces, de ahí surgió la idea de que los castores, como ya menciona Mario, además de desplazarse de manera natural por los arroyos o los ríos, caminan distancias grandes. Entonces, es muy probable que ese castor que estaba en las montañas Huachucas haya caminado para llegar a ese cuerpo de agua.
Whew, I like to I like to cover that. Thank you, Gerardo. And but yes, I mean it is coming back to the capacity of these beavers to be able to actually walk some really good distance. And when we're walking, talking about really good distance, we are talking something. I mean, from Los Fresnos, speculating here to the Santa Cruz, is around 20 plus miles. And they go up and they come down, and it's several mountains in there. So 25 miles for a beaver, it's a huge distance, but they're able to walk that. But also there were evidence of new families appearing in water pools close to the Huachucas, 1 kilometer away from the border. But that's because there is water pools in there. There are some arroyos that maintain some of those pools around Los Fresnos, around the Huachucas, and they've been seeing some evidence of those families that stays there because the water stays there, but the arroyos are pretty much dry. But also, let's not forget that in 2005 and 2006, those were rainy years, and they were wet years, so beavers have the opportunity to spread a little bit more because of streams. So it's that combination between wet years, wet systems, streams, pools of water, and that these beavers migrate. That's what I captured from from Gerardo. And yes, I mean another partner, another organization also close to the Huachucas was Sky Island Alliance, and they are the ones that registered that pretty close to the border actually. And there is no wall in there, so it's just interesting to see that relation as well.
Thank you, Gerardo, for sharing that. It's so fascinating. Know we're getting close to the end of the hour here. I could ask questions for another hour because I have so many questions with all these amazing experts here tonight. Before we get to a few more questions, just want to thank everyone again for attending tonight, this Beavers and Brews Binational Bash. It really was a binational affair, a bilingual affair. Thank you so much to all our guest presenters. I think some really good connections are being made here. I'm definitely going to go back and copy the chat because there's so much I've missed, but a lot's happening in the chat that we're going to want to follow up on. If you have not gotten the chance and would like to support all this beaver related work, please just text Beavers to 707070 on your phone. We have a really easy way to donate online. We're still trying to reach our $75,000 goal tonight, which will fund all of WMG's efforts to work on river restoration and the beaver related side of this work. If you're not involved in the River Run Network yet, please also check that out. If you're in the Tucson area, that's a great way to get involved and stay in touch with all of this beaver work as it moves forward. If folks need to go, we totally understand. If folks can stay on for a little bit longer, I do want to at least follow one more line of thought and maybe one more toast. I know, Joaquin, you haven't done a toast yet.
One more toast.
But maybe you want to do another one.
I am so ready for a brindis, for a toast. And there is a question in the chat. What are we going to do with this group of people? What we are going to do is continue conversation, continue talking, continue strategizing, but we are going to get together to monitor these beavers sometimes in the fall of this year. So I'm challenging myself. I'm challenging Gerardo from Los Fresnos and TNC. I'm challenging Steve and Mike to get together and do a binational beaver count. For this group, that would be so amazing to do that, to start understanding that. So a toast for that, un brindis para los castores binacionales y muchas gracias a todos ustedes.
Yes, thank you.
Gracias, un abrazo a todos y mucho
Salud.
éxito.
Salud.
Y vámonos para el avispe, están las balsas.
Mario is also inviting us to the Bavispe River.
Yes,
Why not?
we're ready.
We just need kayaks and inflatable boats, so problem.
That sounds great. Okay, before folks check out, I want to find out, do any of you have any more information on the beavers in the Santa Cruz watershed? So WMG is really excited about Las Cienegas, but we've also heard and seen evidence of beavers in the upper part of the Santa Cruz watershed. Have we seen families there? Are there dams? Are these just dispersed efforts? Do we have any idea how many beavers are in Mexico in the Santa Cruz? Any information?
I have two records from last year. One of them was killed because they say the beavers are gonna destroy all the trees in the river. So I think we have one record.
A single beaver or a family?
Yeah, I don't know. We need to monitor to see if we have a family group. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
When was that, Mario? ¿Cuándo fue eso que encontraron uno muerto? When was that?
El año pasado lo mataron. El año
So that was
pasado
last-
hicimos, perdón, el antepasado, en 2019.
2019, yeah.
En 2019 hicimos expedición a Sierra Chivato
Mm.
y acaba de matar a un individuo, ¿no? La
Wow.
gente de San Lázaro porque decía que estaba haciendo daño a los árboles.
Yeah, that's what Trevor mentioned too. In 2019, there was an expedition to the Chivato mountain range. That's why the Santa Cruz has a U in Mexico, because of that mountain range. And so that was the evidence of right there on San Lázaro that a beaver got killed because it was damaging the trees.
Is there any talk about in with Profana or Naturalia with moving beavers into the Santa Cruz?
Joaquin, Tonio, and I, we talk about that. Maybe we can do something, some environmental education in the area, and maybe if we do John the 4th with Naturalia, maybe we can move maybe one or two family groups to the Santa Cruz. But we need to do education first.
Mm-hmm. Well, interesting. We want to help too. Yes. Joaquin, this is your job now.
Yeah, and that's why, as Lisa keeps saying, that's why it's so important for your assistance, your help, to continue working with beavers in both sides of the border. And we also have another very interesting participant here, Juan Manuel, I'm sorry, from Cuenca Los Ojos, and they also have their own experience with Naturalia, with Mario, José Manuel Pérez, and José, que you nos puedes explicar un poquito, más o menos, qué está pasando con los castores en Cajón Bonito, creo que se llama el lugar.
Y Joaquín, buenas tardes, saludos a todos. Yeah, with the support of CONAM and Naturalia, we have released for 2 years individuals to the Cajón Bonito, and they are doing really, really well. Right now we have two big family groups on the Cajón Bonito. They have had kids there, and we are really excited. The ecosystem is changing a lot. They are not together. They are probably between 7 miles between each family. One is really south of the border between New Mexico and Arizona, and the other one is eastern in Rancho Nuevo, eastern of that border, but still on the Cajon Bonito. And yeah, we are really, really excited. They are changing the ecosystem. They are improving the infiltration of water and changing all the habitat there.
And those beavers, Jose Manuel, they are the ones, and I think Carlos showed us some of those pictures. They were transferred from Los Fresnos to Cajon Bonito. Is that correct?
Yeah, Naturalia did a great job. They first surveyed the area and decide if the Cajon Bonito was the proper habitat for them. And they did all the study before releasing the beavers from the Cajon. And then we captured some beavers that were having conflicts with the landowners there in the San Pedro Basin, and then decided to change it to Cajon Bonito with the help of CONAM.
And Cajon Bonito, just the geography, where more or less it's located from Bisbee or from Douglas or from Cananea, Agua Prieta.
It's just south of the border between Arizona and New Mexico, and it's the river is 2 miles south of that border, and it's that is right now is protected. We are a private protected area, ADBC, created by CONAM, and right now we just signed an agreement, an easement, finally, so we are protected for perpetuity, and that river is protected on the long term with funds for that.
So once again, I mean, I have representation of at least 3 watersheds here, and that's thanks once again, thanks to the Beavers, and maybe thanks to the connection back to 1999 when those beavers were originally released. And that's where WMG, Lisa, and all of us at WMG got, oh my God, that's a wonderful story in the sense of health of rivers, health of beavers, health of indication of what the possibilities of bringing back the health of our rivers. And because those rivers bring us so much diversity in these desert rivers, if you want to call them like that. So anyway, that is a wonderful story that we will continue talking about this. But I do want to stay with the invitation for the beaver count, dry wet mapping beaver count. With all of us that are here, I think that would be a wonderful message and a wonderful binational collaboration.
Joaquín, si pudiera agregar un poco nada más de lo que menciona José Manuel, creo que el hecho de que con el apoyo de CONAM atendiéramos la problemática, el conflicto de los castores con los ganaderos en el San Pedro, y poder coordinar entre 2 áreas destinadas voluntariamente a la conservación, como es Cuenca, Los Ojos y Los Fresnos, el poder colaborar y hacer un trabajo para rescatar a estos castores, creo que le da mucho sentido a las actividades que hacen las organizaciones de la sociedad civil al manejar o administrar áreas protegidas y sobre todo que todo este proceso se hizo en perfecta colaboración con los permisos correspondientes de la Dirección General de Vida Silvestre y que los castores pues están de regreso en esta área tan importante como es Cuenca, Los Ojos, que previo a la reintroducción de castores como lo dijo José Manuel, se hizo un estudio de la vegetación, qué tanto hábitat disponible había para estos castores que se llevaron. Y en efecto, el hábitat disponible era más del 50% del que se encuentra en el río San Pedro. Por eso se decidió continuar con este trabajo de reintroducción. Entonces, esa colaboración se mantiene y creo que tanto Valer como José Manuel pues han estado siempre en esa mejor disponibilidad de mantener la colaboración, a quien también pues reconozco su gran trabajo que han hecho para la conservación del agua y de los bosques que ahora tienen estos castores. Gracias.
Gracias, Gerardo. Just to give a little emphasis here, same as the BLM. I mean, these studies were done also in Cajón Bonito, also in San Pedro. We need to assess the situation. We need to understand the ecosystem. We need to see if the habitat is suitable for the reintroduction of this species, like in Cajón Bonito. So there is a lot of research, there is a lot of understanding, there is a lot of collaboration between the federal government, CONAMP, local organizations like Naturalia and Cuenca Los Ojos. And so anyway, there is a process, and all that process it certainly was followed with the right permits and all that in Mexico. So yes, if we're talking about reintroduction of beavers somewhere else, like in the Santa Cruz, as Mario was talking, we've been talking about that. We need to understand that. We need to look into that and see the feasibility of it's not just capturing the beaver and taking it somewhere else. It is a lot of understanding and collaboration. But something very, very important that Gerardo mentioned is that collaboration, education, understanding between the ranching community on both sides of the border in Mexico and the beaver population. That education element has to also happen. So anyway, thank you, Gerardo. Gracias, Gerardo.
So I have a question for our Mexican partners. Are any of your organizations tagging the beavers?
Que si alguna organización, Gerardo, José Manuel, Mario, están etiquetando o poniéndole un chip a los castores en Sonora.
Mira,
the ones that we released, the original ones from the San Pedro River, they have a metal tag on them, and the younger ones born on the Cajón Bonito, we haven't captured them. They born free and they're always been free. We are planning to put some radio transmitter on them just in order to keep track of them, because we are having because of climate change, really unusual rainfall, monsoons or after monsoons, and we are a little complained, or we don't know what's happened with the beaver population if they go south of the river.
Sí, nada más.
Sí, Gerardo.
Algunos de los individuos que liberamos en Cajón Bonito, como dice José Manuel, se les pusieron aretes en las orejas. Algunos individuos transmisor. Sin embargo, estos no a todos se les pusieron en la transmisión pero bueno, estos transmisores de radiotelemetría tenían una vida de 2 años, ¿no? Que ahorita ya no los deben de tener, pero sí tienen los aretes en las orejas, y eso sí tenemos los números TIR por si llegan a pasar a otra región.
Yeah, there's two things that are going on in terms of tagging. Some of the beavers in Sonora, the ones that they were transported into Cajon Bonito, and that's what Jose Manuel was talking about. Some of them have an earring in the ears. Some others have a chip that transmits, a radio transmitter, but the lifespan of those is 2 years. So some of them already vanished that, but they still have that earring. So if at any time those get captured, so there is a tag in some of those ears.
Yeah, I heard from the Arizona Game and Fish that the original 16 beavers released were tagged and they were following. So I'm hoping to get my hands on this data, but they were tracking where the beavers were dispersing to for some number of years, and they have that data filed away. So hoping that we can acquire that information, because I think that might spread some light on where those original beavers moved to. Especially, it sounds like they were in Sonora by 2006. Is there any other earlier evidence, or 2006 was the earliest?
2004. Somebody was saying earlier that they started to see evidence in 2004.
Right.
Mario, you're muted.
I'm sorry. The first record was in 2004 near San Pedro Palominas in the Mexican side of the San Pedro River Basin.
Okay.
And we started collecting wet dry mapping in 2001 in Mexico. I have those. I could scan to see if there's any records. I mean, it's never been a formal piece, but anecdotally collected in the data set. So it's conceivable there could be some records.
Thanks, Brooke. And I've seen a couple of your comments in the chat, but could you just talk a little bit more about that wet dry mapping?
Yeah, yeah, we've got some other, it's nice to see some faces of folks that I communicate with in Mexico here as well. But yeah, so I coordinate the annual San Pedro wet dry mapping. So from the headwaters in Mexico and not in Los Fresnos all the way to the Gila River confluence. And it's done the third Saturday of June or around that week. And it's the primary goal is to collect presence absence of water. And it's the mapping started in 2019, or sorry, 1999.
Wow.
22 years, sorry. Yeah, so it started on the Sprinka Reach and has slowly expanded. The Mexico Reach was started in 2001 and we've been kind of growing ever since. So, but we do collect, at least on public land, we have a pretty tight restrictions on what information we can share on private land, but on the public lands, in coordination with BLM, we do collect some what we call other observations, which includes beaver observations. And I've been providing that data to Marcia Radke. I understand she recently retired. But I can figure out who that data lives with now at this point, but they should have it. And we've been collecting just GPS points of where those observations were.
That would be great. Yeah, there might be some things recorded in there related to beavers. So.
Oh, can I mention that one of the problems was that when the newspaper people talked to Marcia Radke, the BLM wouldn't let her speak. And so the data that she had wasn't accessible to the public. And so it's always nice to, if you're going to share it with the BLM, also share it with somebody else if possible, so that they can't prevent the BLM officials from speaking.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I hear you, Mike.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting piece around doing a also community science-based survey is that data then is by the public for the public. So one of the earlier questions, I don't remember who asked it in the chat, was asking about, are there any apps that any of you all are using for recording beaver sightings, or is this all just Excel spreadsheets and Google Maps? Is there any technology we're using?
I mean, I have an app that I love to use for wildlife sightings called iNaturalist, but I haven't really used it for any of my beaver stuff. But yeah, if you want to get it really out there, like to the whole public where all the beavers are, then that's what you would use. How close to the vest we want to be with on certain locations of the dams, and just because of, you know, people that might take advantage of that for the wrong reason. But that's an app you could use if you're interested.
Thanks, Steve. So one thing we didn't really get into at all tonight was, what are the benefits of beavers? I think we just more or less assumed that they have benefits. We're riding on that assumption tonight. But that would be, I think, a really interesting follow-up to this, a binational sharing of the impacts and benefits of beavers on the river. Any research that's being done on changes in the extent of the floodplain wetting, new reservoirs. To see that photo was pretty cool that Antonio shared. More habitat, more cottonwood recruitment, wildlife. So I think there's probably a whole lot of things that could be shared there. And I also am not familiar with how systematic people are collecting that data. So that would be interesting in itself. What data are you collecting on the impacts of beavers, and what more could be done to share amongst the group that kind of data?
I saw one curious thing, not specifically to the beaver, although the beaver probably impacted it, but I was at a meeting at the BLM and they showed a metal railroad tie that had been stuck into the ground, and they had historic footage. They came back to the site, I think it was only like 10 years or 15 years later, and the silt had piled up 8 feet on that railroad tie or rail. So that was pretty interesting. But it's specifically about beaver. I mean, I've just witnessed them widening the river in places, but I can't say more than that.
¿Cuál es el beneficio de los castores? Gerardo, Carlos, Mario, ¿por qué es bueno tener castores en los ríos?
Yo creo, mira, para el caso del San Pedro, los que conocen el sitio, y bueno, Mario, Toño, Carlos, sabemos que la cobertura forestal de esta área ribereña es poca. Es poca por la actividad, sobre todo ganadera, pero también sabemos que dada la actividad productiva y minera, la disponibilidad de las aguas, de los mantos freáticos cada año es menos. Y el castor, con su trabajo, con sus represas que hace, permite que esta agua se mantenga durante más tiempo del año, sobre todo en secas, y que sea un recurso disponible no solamente para la especie, para ellos, sino para muchas aves residentes y migratorias, así como otros grupos taxonómicos.
Ya. Te cortaste un poquito te cortaste un poquito al final, Gerardo, pero está bien. It is, I mean, there is great evidence of
es muy importante para...
Wow.
Adelante ya, perdón.
Te cortaste un poco, por eso brinqué ahí. Yes, and we're working on that. There is evidence of lack of vegetation cover for obvious reasons of ranching, for example, or mismanagement of cattle, and also over pumping for mining activities of Cananea mining. And so with the beavers also, you see a great evidence of reversing that. You see more vegetation cover. You see more presence of water for longer times during the year, as opposed with no presence of beavers. So that's a very good benefit of having them, is just the presence of water that stays longer on the river system. And with that is infiltrating additional water to the aquifer. With that is creating also additional habitat for all kinds of species. And it benefits themselves as well as benefit other species and other environmental indicators of presence of water and infiltration. And yeah.
Another thing that I heard, I was talking to one of the hydrologists that come out and check the federal hydrologists that check the wells along the San Pedro. There are a whole bunch of wells, and he was telling me a story of how he came and the water level had gone up, the ground level water level had gone up a foot, and he was thinking that something was wrong. And then he walked down to the river and found a beaver dam. So you can see that when the beaver make a dam, that it can bring up the groundwater level.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to make with the creation of the web portal that we're working on right now, is that we're gonna all that data, Mike, from probably the US Geological Survey. We're building a web portal that'll provide kind of all that data that, like, say you have a point where you've observed a beaver dam, you could go and look for the alluvial groundwater wells in that area and look at the data records, select a time period or the entire period of record, and start to look at that data alongside where you have the observations. So the Upper San Pedro Partnership's working on creating that now and should be launched in January. So that is going to be a fantastic resource. I'm going to keep your eye on.
Thank
So
you,
it'll
Brooke.
include the wet dry mapping data will be in there, as well as stream. There's also the Ag Research Service does a similar type of, they have stream flow permanence cameras that look at there's about 7 different points throughout the river system where you are collecting continuous flow data throughout the year. Anyway, so all that's going to be in one place, and you can look at it in any way you want alongside your own data sets, download it. So I think that's going to be a great asset for this body of work.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
This has been an awesome conversation. I have one final question, and I think we'll wrap up for the night. In learning more about beavers in Southern Arizona and Mexico, I've also been learning about beavers in other parts of the US and internationally. And there's a lot of the practices around restoration with beavers is really a growing field that's taken off, it seems, especially in the last 10 years or so. And there's particular, I would say, outfits in other states that are doing some really amazing work around really substantial beaver introduction and river restoration work. I'm wondering if any of the folks in the room have connected with other beaver restoration practitioners. Are people mostly learning by doing, or are you all connecting with folks elsewhere in Mexico or in the US who are doing this?
¿Cuál es la pregunta, Joaquín?
Sí, la pregunta en español es si estamos o están colaborando con algunos otros grupos que estén trabajando en la salud, reintroducción de castores, ya sea en México o en otros, o en Estados Unidos o en otros países. Por ejemplo, si Naturalia está colaborando con algunos otros grupos
Sí,
en el...
mira, como lo mencionó Carlos, bueno, este trabajo lo hemos iniciado como parte de las estrategias del gobierno federal de México para la recuperación de una especie amenazada como es el castor. Y con esas políticas públicas, pues hemos hecho alianzas con la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, con la Unison. Hemos trabajado también con otros grupos de Monterrey que se han interesado en el trabajo que se ha hecho para la conservación de esta población en el San Pedro, porque ellos también tienen castores y se han dado cuenta que también tienen amenazas, sobre todo por el conflicto del ser humano. Y hace un par de años, creo que se llama Río San Joaquín, la organización, nos pidieron que hiciéramos una reunión para intercambiar experiencias. También hemos buscado alguna intercambio con organizaciones como la que ahora se lleva a cabo en California para poder tener experiencias de éxito en temas de restauración, que es muy importante. Y también hemos contactado, inclusive como lo decía Carlos, en busca de mantener la continuidad de este proyecto de conservación, algunas organizaciones que trabajan en el norte de Estados Unidos, creo que Carolina del Norte, si no me equivoco, Carlos por ahí debe de tener el dato, y en México, pues hemos de alguna manera intercambiado experiencias, por ejemplo, con Mario, en su momento cuando estuvo en la CONAM y cuando implementaron su trabajo en el Bavispe, porque son poblaciones que contribuyen a la conservación de toda esta región.
So yes.
Yes.
But it's interesting to hear in several occasions that acronym CONAMP. CONAMP is the Park Service of Mexico, or the protected area of Mexico, and it has designated the beavers as a threatened species, and that has helped to collaborate with other academics as well as other organizations because of that designation. So that's, well, it's good, and also other groups like Monterrey, it was mentioned before, that are showing interest in beavers. So Naturalia as well is collaborating with Mario, with Profauna in different occasions. So at the end, yes, and sharing experiences, sharing data on how beavers are doing somewhere else, and how are they doing in terms of management, and yeah.
Say, Joaquin.
We have been working, I'm sorry.
Joaquin, I was wondering, in Cajon Bonita, they were able to get ranchers to agree to have like a private reserve. Is there any way of doing that along the upper San Pedro in Mexico, so that the ranchers won't be killing the beaver?
Jose.
Cajon Bonito is a private protected area, and we manage 8 properties along the river, and it's private owned. That's why it's more easy to work with. When we work with our teams and to the grazing, avoiding the riparian areas. But yeah, we could share any information with anyone interested in visiting us. Yeah, we are glad to share that information.
And Mike, that's part of working with Profauna, with Mario and Antonio, with the ranching community of San Pedro. That's part of the objective as well. Best management practices of the ranching community. And now we're looking more directly into beavers. And so part of that strategy, we're looking into some private ranchers, ejido ranchers along the San Pedro, for cattle exclusion areas along the San Pedro. And that part is also education. That part is also extending different diversity of wildlife, not only beavers, but wildlife in the ranching community. So we're working with that, yes.
I think Mario was sharing something, and then I wanted to follow up with Carlos too.
I just want to tell you that we were working with Querétaro State University. We're doing joint efforts in the Bavispe, and also with Juan Pablo Gallo, who is in Tecnológico Monterrey in Guaymas, Seattle. So we think that we're going to still work in the area and also in the San Pedro review.
Thank you. Carlos, were you working with or collaborating with anyone in the US at all? Or has it been all with other Mexican organizations?
Que si también están colaborando con alguna otra organización en Estados Unidos o nada más es con organizaciones en México.
Pues es más con las organizaciones en México. Hemos intentado pues, buscar ahí financiamientos estábamos viendo con organizaciones de California, Beaver Dam, creo que se llama, y no recuerdo el nombre de otras que están ahí. Como comentaba Gerardo, hace unos años estuvimos trabajando en el PASE Castor, se llama, es el programa de acción de conservación de especies, porque en México pues está en categoría en peligro de extinción en la NOM 059 de los castores, y como decía Gerardo, pues estuvimos ahí pues, colaborando pues, en el escrito para los planes de conservación con organizaciones como Amigos del Río San Rodrigo se llaman, y también con otros, pues, organizaciones, otras reservas de la CONAM que se encuentran aquí en México, como el Cañón de Santa Elena o Maderas del Carmen, que ahí tienen también registros de castores y pues ahí también los monitorean los trabajadores de la CONAM, de esas áreas naturales protegidas, y algunas pues otras de allá de Monterrey y así, pero pues hemos tenido pues un poco contacto con esas organizaciones.
Sí, nomás para ampliar un poquito, desde hace 2 años estamos trabajando con Sky Island Alliance en un proyecto de monitoreo de fauna silvestre fronteriza, en el cual estamos colocando cámaras trampa a lo largo de la frontera del lado sonorense. Y bueno, la idea es registrar tanto especies prioritarias como los grandes carnívoros, pero también especies como esta, como el castor. Y bueno, ya lo decía Carlos, ¿no? Sí hemos buscado colaboraciones binacionales, inclusive con el Coronado National, con el Coronado National Memorial, tenemos un convenio también con el cual estamos trabajando temas de restauración de hábitats, desde ribereños hasta pastizales nativos, ¿no?
Yeah, there is some collaboration actually going on. You hear the Sky Island Alliance as well as Coronado National areas, and with Sky Islands, more specific, is looking into cameras, wildlife cameras. What's the name of those cameras? To monitor mammals, but also to monitor other species along the border, and beavers is one of them. But again, making emphasis on the fact that CONAMP recognize beavers as an endangered, threatened species that provides other opportunities to collaborate in other states in Mexico, still with or other academic organizations. Carlos mentioned some searching collaboration with other US organizations, and Gerardo also mentioned one in North Carolina, as well as in California, something called Beaver Dam, California Beaver Dam.
Dam or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So yeah, but interesting to look into the Sky Island Alliance. I mean, we partner with them as well as with the Coronado National Memorial.
Thank you.
Y bueno, perdón, nada más con José Manuel, ¿no? Con Cuenca Los Ojos, que bueno, ellos también supongo mucho del financiamiento, José Manuel que está ahí, pues es también en parte de organizaciones, no sé si propias o también de Estados Unidos.
And of course, José Manuel is here, and he represents Cuenca Los Ojos. We've been hearing about that. So that's a really strong collaboration right there.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Gracias a todos. We really enjoyed the evening. Thank you so much for staying on. This last hour has been fascinating to kind of have a little more dialogue. We are very interested in continuing to collaborate. Tenemos interés en continuar colaborar con todos ustedes. So again, thank you. We will be in touch. We will keep this Beaver movement alive.